Everybody smiles in the same language. A smile, let your light come shining through.
Welcome to the Celebrate Happiness Roadshow podcast. I'm Sandra M., coming to you from Santa Fe, New Mexico, the land of enchantment. I interview people from all parts of the world about what happiness means to them. What are they in love with? In each episode, we'll give you a key to happiness to include in your life. And of course, we'll play a happy tune from my live Celebrate Happiness Roadshow.
A smile doesn't cost you anything.
Today we're talking with Tim Sales. Tim lives in Pasadena, California, where he serves on the city's Design Commission and Transportation Advisory Commission. He attended the University of California, Los Angeles, achieving a master's degree in urban planning. As an urban planner and developer, he has directly managed the development of over 250 units of multifamily residential units, and currently he leads RC Homes' new product segment efforts in the area of build-for-rent investment and development. Tim has also been the executive in charge of operations for an affordable home ownership developer, as well as the corporate marketing manager for 2 national home builders. His experience and expertise includes market and economic feasibility studies for residential, retail, restaurants, entertainment, and cultural venues. Welcome, Tim. I'm excited to talk with you about happiness.
Good day, Sandra. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, I have so many questions for you, but since this is a podcast about happiness, I'm going to start off with, could you tell me about your happiness journey or what happiness means to you?
Thank you for asking. Well, first of all, it makes me happy to be talking to you about happiness, about happiness today, because it's a very worthwhile subject, and I think people make a lot of assumptions about happiness and really needs to be unpacked. You know, for me, a lot of my life is thinking about things very analytically and I spend a lot of time in my head. And so for me, I've kind of tried to break happiness down to some real basics, So when I'm happy, when I'm trying to be better at my practice of being conscious and aware and in the moment, and trying to do things that are pushing me to a greater sense of flow. And we could talk more about that, but there's a lot of things that do that. But to me, if you think about it, sort of objectively at the big level, that's kind of how I frame it up, and then I try to hang things that make me happy in that framework.
I just love the way your imagery, having a large picture and then hanging. No one has ever said that, but hanging happiness within the large picture. How fantastic!
Right, because you're not going to be happy. Well, I'm not going to be happy every moment of every day. But I think that if I know the things that and the processes and the structure that makes me happier, that's to me like a big achievement. And it's a practice, right? It's not something that I'm not sitting here saying I'm 100% good at it all the time. But if you can kind of return to that, have a way of snapping yourself back into reality and being in the moment and really being appreciative for what you have in this moment and focusing on that moment, I think it's a lot easier to find happiness, for me at least.
Right, appreciative or grateful. That's a big word these days in the happiness movement. And just learning how to be grateful for what you have, because so many people are so externally connected, meaning they are looking like having a carrot in front of their nose, trying to get this, trying to get that, and then they forget what they actually have.
Right, absolutely.
Yes?
I think, totally and completely. And I think that, if you start to build it up from some building blocks, it's a little easier. Like, for example, I mean, I think a more direct answer to, kind of happiness, what makes you happy is, for me personally, things that connect with my values, right? Things that I think are important, like I'm a big person, like that's why I say, quite honestly, it's great to talk to you, because one of my highest value is learning and sharing. I just love to learn things, and I love to share them back out, because when I share them back out, they help me, it helps me to understand even better, right? I mean, there's nothing worse than an expert who doesn't want to like learn more. You want to learn something and then share it and see, what am I missing? How does that relate? So for me, it's like learning and sharing is a big thing that makes me happy. Also, I'm a creative person. I know that you've had a lot of creative people on your podcast, and I'm a amateur musician and play music every day.
What?
Yeah.
What do you play?
I play the piano. So I have my piano. So
yes.
Right. So that's like, for me, a lifeline to happiness. Like, if I'm really feeling poorly, I can go right there, and like it'll all just sort of like, some days it's not that great, because sometimes you're like going, oh gosh. But if you really if you really think about it, it's like another part of your brain. And so I think that, these things, those are tangible things that make me happy, right? Like, if I have something hard to do, but I have to learn something about and figure out and then do, that's a really good day for me. And, most of the time, we don't always get to be in that space because we have all these other things we have to do. But, for me, that's a happiness place, right? But, those are things that I can rely upon in myself to try to make my brain happier.
I have a question. What kind of music do you play?
Well, so I play all kinds of music. I mean, I actually studied composition and theory as my undergraduate degree, and so I'm sort of a doodler. I play all kinds of music. I was raised playing popular music, and the reason I started playing the piano was because I liked Elton John, right? So that tells you a story right there. So I started piano playing because it's like, hey, so I can play like Elton John really well. But I think that but I also love like all kinds of art music, the so-called classical music or jazz. I mean, it all appeals to me because, I think for me, someone and you can tell from my composition and theory focus, I'm analytical. I like to understand, how does this work, right? Why is this working? How does it? So that I really get excited about. So, I do it for myself. I'm not like going out and doing amateur gigs and stuff, but it's a release for me to be, creative and have that moment where when I'm doing it, I'm not usually thinking about anything else.
Right. Totally understand, because I'm in that world myself. But so let me just ask you, so I want to just, before I get into other things that I have in my mind to ask you about, I wanted to talk about this whole idea of urban planning and developing, because I think it's so vitally important in the world today. I mean, don't we have like a huge homeless population? I know I'm living here in Santa Fe, and we have a huge homeless population, San Francisco, all these other places. And I'm just, even down in, I don't know, you're in Pasadena, do you have the same situation?
Everywhere. Sure. Everywhere.
Okay. So I'm just wondering if there's a tie-in, and maybe there isn't, but in developing, you said build for rent investments and developing units of multifamily, et cetera. I know they're not being developed for the homeless necessarily, but we do realize how important having a good home is. And why are you involved in that? I mean, does that really turn you on? Do you love it? Okay. Yeah. Let me hear about that.
That's a great question, right? I think that I can take my love for urban planning back to being a little kid and thinking, gosh, what's going on? And this is like, we live in these cities, and if you open your eyes, and when you're a little kid, I think your eyes are more open because you only have questions. You don't have other things polluting your brain, like, responsibilities or fears, and hopefully not fears. So I can remember being a little kid thinking, how does this all work? And being very interested in that. And I studied that because I felt that it was something you could do to make a physical difference in the world, right? The real estate development is in the built environment. That's a term of art that urban planners use. It's the built environment, right? So you're doing something, and I always say to people, good, bad, or indifferent, if you get a project done, you can really take, pride in the fact that we got it done, because that's no small thing. Yeah. And I think that a lot of times people are constantly criticizing themselves, myself included, to say, oh, it could be this, it could be that, it could be better, it could be bigger, it could be purple, whatever. It doesn't matter. You have to say, we did it, right? And to say we did it is to speak to the fact that no one does this alone, and it's a human endeavor. And, I always say everything would be easy if it wasn't for humans, right? But you have to, work with people, and you have to, be always engaged in, trying to move things forward and understand people and, be of service to the pursuit. And it's a challenge, right? So I opened up saying, I know that I'm an analytical person. My brain is always firing, which actually is a challenge for happiness, right? But if you can, the less you think about things, the more happy I think you might be, is my hypothesis.
Join Sandra M. at her live performance of the Celebrate Happiness Roadshow, a toast to love and happiness in life. It's an uninhibited musical adventure, Sunday, February 4, 3 p.m. at the Santa Fe Women's Club. Our next adventure is guaranteed to awaken your happiness vibe. Celebrate with upbeat rhythms, love songs, special guests, and fun stories, some told by you in the audience. Enjoy Todd Lowry, Sandra's musical guest and accompanist, singing his happy and hopeful originals. To celebrate happiness with Sandra M. and the Celebrate Happiness Roadshow, email sandra@sandramcknight.com. Stay tuned for ticket information and save that date, Sunday, February 4, 3 p.m. to celebrate happiness with Sandra M.
But I think that I do enjoy the pursuit of it. I enjoy the people and the process, even though the process can be frustrating. And I most of all just really enjoy the fact that we get it done. Now, the issue of homelessness, the issue of all these things is beyond the built environment, right? It's a policy thing. It's an economic thing. It's so complicated. It's a whole other podcast. But I think that, the simplistic way of looking at it is, we have a housing shortage. We have a shortage of care for people, because really homelessness solutions they are about housing, but they're about a lot of other things too, a lot of social services and, about really making space for people, right, and meeting them where they're at and trying to help them. And that's a very challenging endeavor. But I take pride in that, generally speaking, I'll say this last thing about it, the more that we can build housing, the better off that we will be, no matter what kind of housing it is. Because in California, and I think Santa Fe is the same way, there's been a tendency to not want to have development. And in California, at least, we've had 40 years, almost 50 years of really underdeveloping housing, and it makes things too expensive, and it just provides a lot of externalities that make people really crazy. It's hard. I fortunately own a house. I'd hate to be somebody trying to buy a house. I mean, it's very frustrating and challenging, and but that's the reason why I pursued that. And I think it does kind of relate back to my pursuit of urban planning and development. It relates back to my side of creativity and analytical and people and trying to move the needle in some way.
Make a better place for everybody. I agree with you. And so now I have one other big thing I know, because we've talked previously, just a little bit of an introduction before we got into the podcast. And I know that recently you have gone to Bhutan. And I, of course, take people to Bhutan. This is part of my Celebrate Happiness Roadshow. I do the podcast, I do a live show, and then once a year I have a travel company, a local travel company in Bhutan, and I take people to Bhutan. And I would love, you were there for what? Did you say 7, 10 days or something like that?
Like I think it's 9 days, yeah.
And so you had a lot of time to really sort of sink into that. And I would love that experience, and I would love to hear what you felt about Bhutan and why did you go there? And I know this is a place where they calculate the gross national happiness of their people. It's the only place in the world that they do that.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to tell you about it. I think that, I think I shared with you previously, the reason I went there is because someone mentioned it to me as the best place they'd ever been. And this was just a casual conversation at a dinner party. And I thought, my wife and I have traveled a lot of places. I mean, we love to travel. We've been to Egypt, Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, Jordan. And I think one of the contexts for me about travel is discovery, right? I want to learn new things. I want to see the world with new eyes. I want that experience of seeing something for the first time and reacting to it, hopefully being moved by it in a positive way, but it just, like having that stimulus of something that is a different culture, a different society. But the reason I went, quite honestly, was because, it was planted in my head, and I thought, I've never heard of Bhutan. And I think I'd heard of that gross domestic happiness thing, which I think is a really brilliant frame up, right? Like, I don't know anything about how they do that, but I think it's really important that they've got that conversation at the forefront, right? This is what I'm getting at. Like, people say, oh, I want to be happy. Yeah, okay, well, then do the work. Do the work. Like, what does that really mean to you? Because it doesn't mean the same thing to everyone, nor will it ever mean the same thing to everyone. But to have a lens to see the world through happiness is a very relevant thing. But, so when I got there, it is an amazing place because it's a couple of things that I will focus on were, one, it's beautiful in a natural setting sort of a way. I mean, and I've been to a lot of places in Asia, and it's not what I expected. It's the beautiful alpine climate with the Himalayas behind. So it's got a very beautiful, and actually it feels a lot like the High Sierras in California in some ways. It feels like Switzerland. It actually connects with you in a way that you go like, oh, hey, I can relate to this place. It's not alien. It's sort of beautiful and tranquil. And then the other part of it is this sort of tranquility and peacefulness, which comes from the natural setting, but it also comes from the people and the society and the culture and the religion and the look of it. So it's as someone who's in real estate and arch design and stuff, it is phenomenally different than any place you've ever been. I mean, and
can I interrupt a moment?
Yeah, of course.
Did you get to Tiger's Nest? Yeah, I have to ask. I just have to.
We did, sure. Well, no, we went to Tiger's Nest, and Tiger's Nest is usually at the end of the trip because Bhutan is very high in elevation, and they want the foreigners to acclimatize, and Tiger's Nest is like, I don't know, whatever it is, 3,000 or 4,000 feet difference in elevation from when you start to where I don't know, it's a lot. And so we did that the last day, but that's phenomenal. And the, Google, Bhutan Zong or some DZHONG, and you'll see these amazing structures, which here's one thing. So visually, it's unlike anything you've ever seen, the built environment, the way that these villages and cities were done, not necessarily the new ones, but even in the existing ones, they are kind of unique. But these zongs, which were really the city hall and the temple, and they still are. These are from the 16th century, is that
way
right?
Back.
And they're really old. And there's many of these, basically one for each county or city, and they're still in use today. There's still the temple and there's still the city hall. And see, now that's important to me because the culture there has a long history and it's still in their spirit. It's still in their daily use. If you want a driver's license, you're going to this 500-year-old, whatever it is, what looks to be like a fort or a
Building.
temple and building. And it's just, to me, amazing, because that is something that has resonance, right? And sort of like, and they treat these places with respect. The men and women who normally dress in relatively the same color of native clothing they've done for a long time, they have to wear a certain thing or act in a certain way. So, it's a first world country in technology and all these things, but there's still this real connection to old ways. And I think that there's a certain peacefulness that comes with that, like a sense of belonging and stability that is often, those things are often missing in modern life. It's really unusual, and we fight for those things, stability and belonging. We fight about them and we fight for them, right? It's hard to always get those things.
Right.
And I think that there it's palpable. The last thing I'll say is sort of the way that the religion there is, it's a Buddhist religion, and it's a Tibetan-influenced version of Buddhism, and it's fascinating because it's just so multi-layered. But the one thing that I took from it was that, the visions that you have of like the prayer flags on the sides of the hills, the visions you have on the mountains, right? They're really way up there, right? And there's, scores and scores of them, and they're flapping in the wind. The sound of the ringing bell that is turning being rung every time the prayer wheel rings with the water wheel. These are things that are like visual and auditory reminders of that you're here in this moment. You're nowhere else. You're right here. And that is something which I think even our guide, who I wasn't prompting for, that's what they were saying too. They were saying it's a reminder. And it's like, yes, that's great, because you don't need to be, religious and spiritual in an overt way all the time, but these are things that connote, remind people of their spiritual and religious and communal background. They're just constantly there. So there's a beauty in that is just amazing. So I think that adds to the peacefulness. So, I felt peaceful a lot of places when I traveled because I'm being stimulated and learning, but there it was exceptional because I got these things, or I parsed out these things, or I came to understand these things in the way that I chose to understand them, which was very meaningful to me.
We invite you and yours to an intimate 14-day happiness journey to Bhutan, the lost kingdom of happiness, coming in May of 2024. Experience the magnificent beauty, magic, and mystery of this ancient culture that calculates the gross national happiness of its people. Happiness, Bhutan style, is an adventure of a lifetime. Go to BhutanLostKingdomTours.com and click on Special Tour Packages to download your itinerary for Being in Love with Life, a happiness journey to Bhutan with Miss Sandra McKnight. And remember, celebrate happiness with Sandra M.
So would you think that they equate happiness and peacefulness and just being in the moment and constantly just being in the flow of life? Would you say that's something that they are doing in their world up there? Because when I go there, I just forget everything, all of the hurry, bustle that we have in our world, the Western world, and everything just seems to come together, as you just said, in a beautiful, peaceful moment. Yes, people do have illnesses, they have poverty there, other things like that, just like we
smartphones.
do. Yeah, they have smartphones, yes.
Which are the worst thing for happiness ever. But no, I think you're right. I think, I can't say because I'm not them, but I think that that's a reasonable hypothesis. And I think that, there's a lot of, I think that Bhutan is like at the highest echelons of my experience in sort of a spiritual setting. I haven't been to Tibet, but there is sort of the dividing line between Eastern thought and Eastern religion and Western thought and Western religion. And of course, you find elements of this in other cultures. I think that, Japan has a lot of this, and that comes from their Shinto and animist, which actually the Bhutanese were animists as well. They believed in like the spirits of everything, rocks and rivers and all this.
They still do.
And they still do, but it's been filtered through and recast into a Buddhist framework. So that's why I say it's complicated, right? Religion is a tree, right? Everything grows, and someone has a new limb, a new thought, and they try to make it relevant. And they did that definitely in Bhutan, right? It's a logical thing to do. But so there's other places that have it, but I think that it is that sort of what you and I are kind of trying our best to explain. I think that is something you find more in Eastern culture and Eastern religion than you do in Western. Yes. But it's certainly not always. Not everywhere you go in the East is really palpably different than here. A lot of it, unfortunately, has been polluted by a lot of consumer, materialist kind of capitalistic ideas that are fighting. Everyone's fighting for the same thing, and you lose it. I think there's a sense of like belonging in the group that is something that is meaningful to the spirit of humans and the happiness of humans that we often lose sight of here in the West.
Exactly. I think you're so right about that. And I just love the way you've explained your experience there.
Thank you.
Everybody you're welcome. Everybody I know that goes there comes back with an enormous shift in their consciousness. And they go into our world again, our Western world, with a new perception, a new idea about living, etc. And it sounds like the same has happened to you to a certain degree, which is fantastic. And, we're coming close to the end of our time together, but I was just wondering a few other things.
Sure.
And I wanted just to ask, we're talking about being in our Western world, right? Basically in America, because that's where we both live, right?
Right.
But do you think that people are actually born happy? I know some people are born with, illnesses and other things like that. I do understand that. But the majority of people, do you think they're born happy? And then how do we keep that going?
Yeah. Well, absolutely, people are born happy. I mean, there's no doubt about it. People are born without the clutter of life that distracts us from happiness. The point of life is to find joy and happiness, right? It's like, although that came to me only recently, and Bhutan was not I was open to Bhutan because I've been doing a lot of work on myself in this area. So I got Bhutan, I think, this way. But I think that, so I'm open to it. People are born happy. We don't really have the language and toolbox to, I think, educate people about happiness. I think which starts as being a child, and what's modeled for you as behavior by your parents. What are the things that they put forth as being important? And a lot of life is about trying to achieve stability, get enough that you feel like you're stable and have some sense of control. I mean, there's a lot of challenges in life that are in the material world that are like money, and I think that parents try to shield their children from that, but it's in our world, right? We see that, and you're always going to see that. You'll see that in Bhutan too, but I think that maybe the difference might be in how other frameworks of culturation, are instilled. Like, what is your spiritual education like? What's the focus on that? And that might be also deviating from happiness in the moment. We're strivers. Americans are the worst. I mean, I love America. I love my country. But I'm just saying, culturally, we're always striving for something more. And we have a challenge, right? It's like, well, what about right now? What about me just being happy with being grateful, being appreciative for what I have right now, and making space for people to enjoy it together, because we struggle with that. So we definitely kind of get off the course, and I think it's something that's really much more, though, right now, Sandra, in the zeitgeist, or the element of like there's a lot of talk about behavioral health and mindfulness, and that's great because you need that. And those are tool sets, those are frameworks to get to a better place. And happiness, maybe people think he's crazy to think that the purpose of life is joy, right? But it is. And I mean, however you want to find, I know, but it's an audacious thing to say for some people. And to have the tools to achieve it, and to also recognize that it's about you. It's not about anybody else. Don't, yes, you need to have certain things to live, but don't be overly reliant on external stimulus. I am one that fell into this all the time. I thought I needed to be told how great I was, or thank you for this or that. It's like, no, feel appreciative that you got an opportunity to be engaged in something in this manner, and take it at that. And if someone says good job, you say, oh, thank you, but don't expect it. Just be happy from your internal perspective, the world as you see it, the facts on the ground, how you see things and react to things, and find things that are in alignment with how, the values that you have and those things that bring you joy, and hopefully take you to a place where you're not have a cluttered mind. You have those moments of consciousness and just flow where you're going like, oh, that was amazing. What just happened for 30 minutes?
Yes, exactly, and which is what we just did. We had 30 minutes of wonderful conversation. Thank you.
That was very good.
Thank you so much. Yes, and it's been a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to having this out. Your friends and everybody will be able to hear this in, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks from now, just after Christmas.
Sounds great.
Weekly Key to Happiness 14. Ditch your phone. Unplug all the electronics for at least 1 hour per week, or a shorter amount of time 3 times a week. You might be surprised at the difference it makes. Let your mind wander free for a change. Read, meditate, take a walk, and pay attention to the surroundings. Be sociable or be alone. Just be.
Thank you for tuning in to Celebrate Happiness with us. And before we go, I'd like to thank today's guest, Tim Sales, for sharing his happiness story. Share your happiness story on the Celebrate Happiness Roadshow podcast. Send an email to sandra@sandramcknight.com.
Turn your smile on, you can't go wrong. You'll find that love is all.